industry is to get sources and maybe make them trust you.
Yeah.
And what do you do as far as trust building, or how do you start to bridge that gap?
It's a slow process of, finding people who are interesting. You can do that by reading journals, the newspaper, that kind of stuff. And then, seeing whether they'll speak with you and developing a relationship with them. Making them comfortable. It helps if you speak the language.
And something you always try to do, like not ever in a public place, always kind of real private so that nobody else knows? Or?
No, I mean, your first meeting could be at McDonald's. That's not a problem, and then things can develop from there. There's a courting process, if you will. And it's different in a way. I mean, in some cases, if they're a government official, then they're doing it officially. It's like they're going to use you like a U.S. government official would use a reporter as well as for a leak or whatever. That's a different kind of relationship. But if you're looking to cultivate a source, it's a different experience. But it's done pretty much the same as it's done in America. You just got to get to know the person, go over and see them, talk to them, chat with them, and then take it from there. And a lot of the tips come from people who are unlike. I got one of my most interesting tips actually from the sons of a really good source of mine. We were all going out together, and they said, "Oh, my dad's been talking about this at home. Isn't this amazing?" And then I talked to their dad about it, and their dad gave me a lot more information. But it helped that I become, a friend of the family. The friendship remains. Burning them is something that you can't do. As Jill says, this is a small community, not just in journalism, but also kind of around the world, and it's something that's very important to remember. Don't burn your sources in the back.
Okay, just a few more questions, because we're, believe it or not, almost an hour into this. It's been fascinating. Okay.
Do you help from the local news networks or the correspondents there?
Do we hear from them?
No, do you take help from them once?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the Chinese and the best tip sheets for me were Chinese reporters. And also a lot of Chinese news stories are censored. They're not allowed to publish them. So, if you have good friends in Chinese publications, then they would basically tell me, this story's just been censored by my boss.
And then that you can publish it here?
Well, I can't steal it. I have to kind of get the details, re-report it, and kind of walk it back and make sure it's true.
Okay. I've been planning to ask this for a while. For Tiananmen Square, how did the students react to you? And I was watching a video of a different reporter saying that they were protecting journalists and keeping them safe.
The Tiananmen Square, the students throughout were, they knew that we were their kind of bridge to the outside world. So they were very, helpful. Their organization, interestingly enough, was kind of like a Leninist party organization. They sort of mirrored the Communist Party of their parents. But because I'd been a student in China, I sort of had a natural. I like hanging out in their dorm rooms. For me, wasn't like going to like another country, because I'd lived in a Chinese dorm room for 2 years, in the early '80s. And so there was I was very relaxed. In some cases, they protected us, but when things got really bad, everyone was trying to protect themselves. And then, interestingly enough, that in the beginning of the Tiananmen Square demonstrations, most of the kids were from Beijing. By the end of the Tiananmen Square demonstration, when the crackdown happened, the kids who were on the square were from outside of Beijing. And all the Beijing kids had been taken home by their parents. Literally their parents would come down, yank, little Wong home and say, because they had heard the crackdown was coming. And so most of the kids who were really killed or significantly seriously hurt were from outside of Beijing.
When you make these relationships with people in these very difficult situations, it's got to be difficult to lead them in these situations as a point of response and then report on it. How do you deal with that, just the emotional strain of that, and trying to maintain your objectivity in the midst of that?
That's a really good question. In China, because I lived there in the early '80s and the late '80s, and then I went back in the late '90s, I was able to renew my relations with a lot of my friends from both the early 80s and the late and Tiananmen Square period. Although a lot of them have gone overseas, some of them have been in jail, but most of the people, actually all the people that I knew in town were in jail. And so they're either living in China or abroad. And so I renewed my relationship. It's sort of, because it's kind of a second home for me. In Bosnia, I never went back. After Christmas Eve, 1996, when I drove out. And the final kind of thing happened, I was stopped at a checkpoint by a Croatian cop who robbed me of 800 Deutschmark. So I got a small price to pay. I had 5,000 hidden elsewhere in the car. But I just never really wanted to go back to Bosnia. It's just something that, it was a really 4 years of real kind of difficult work. Although I, on Facebook now, have many old new friends from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from Serbia, from Croatia, and that's a way that I've renewed relations with these people with whom I've spent many difficult hours.